Welcome to this unboxing and quick start guide for the Namaste 3-axis gimbal. This guide applies for both the aluminum and the plastic iterations of the gimbal, as they're similar when it comes to setup. I'll start by setting these aside and bringing up the package as you would receive it. Now, of course, there will be a lot of foam and protective material in here. You can go ahead and unravel all that, and you will find the ready to fly gimbal. You will find some spare hardware and zip ties for mounting. Next, you'll find some spare mounts that we'll go through in a bit. A third-person view camera mount. And lastly, some hex keys, 1.5, 2mm, and 3mm hex keys. Although if you have the appropriate drivers, I do recommend using them. We'll start by quickly taking a look around the gimbal. First off, you'll find that there's a crossfire receiver or ELRS receiver, but depending on your choice, on the side of the base here, along with the antenna, which is not secured. It is on a removable mount so that it compacts for transportation. So you can start by just clicking this into place and securing that. You will also see this balance cable, which is designed to be connected to the balance port of a 6S battery for power. So just mind that as you handle the gimbal. Now I'll be walking through the features and the usability of the gimbal as we set up the gimbal step by step. But I do want to point out right now that there is a switch at the top of the gimbal that can be accessed with the end of a hex driver. And you will see a B and a T. And this switch represents the configuration the gimbal will be mounted in. So B represents bottom mount, which will be slung underneath the drone, whereas T represents top mount and will be mounted on the top of the drone. For this demonstration, we'll be mounting it on the top. So I'll flick that switch towards the T there. And next, I want to point out these mounts that we include. You'll find that the gimbal comes with a 3-tab system that is very similar to the GoPro tabs. They're the same dimensions. There's just a third additional tab. And the reason for this is that this gimbal is just too heavy for 2 tabs to be able to support it. The 3 tabs gives it the strength that it really needs. And as such, we've included universal mounting for just about anything, including a drone. So there's a large VHP pad on the bottom. You can go ahead and take the sticky pad off and mount it wherever you want to on your drone. Now in this case, I'm using my go-to rig for gimbal flying, which is a Camera Butter 7-inch frame with a FPV cycle 30mm motors, a hobby wing stack, and this rig has a Caddx walk-snail VTX system in it. So it's a pretty standard long-range quad with crossfire, by the way. But you'll see that I've integrated the 3-tab style mounts on both the top and the bottom, so I can choose which configuration I want. And in the accessories bag, you'll also find one of these little tabs. And the point of this is to be able to make the mount backwards compatible. So if you want to fix your GoPro directly to this without changing the mounts, you can insert your GoPro as you normally would, insert the tab on the last slot, and just secure it down. With my configuration switch set properly for top mount, I'm going to flip the gimbal over and I'm going to mount it onto the 3 tabs. And I will use a 3mm driver to tighten that down. Now before tightening this bolt down, I recommend taking a look at the angle of the gimbal, and I recommend matching it to the angle of your FPV camera. That will give you kind of the best range of motion. And then you'll want to make sure that this bolt is really quite tight. Otherwise, in sharp maneuvers in flight, this whole gimbal can pivot forward and backwards, which is of course not what we want. Next, we're going to take a look at setting up the VTX and FPV system. In this case, I'm demonstrating a gimbal that is ready to fly with a 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗓 avatar system. If you purchased your gimbal with the VTX included, it will be all set up, mounted in the proper ways, and connected to power appropriately. However, I also have a gimbal here without a VTX mounted to it. And I just want to demonstrate how you would do this with pretty much any VTX. Here's an 03 system. Here's a Caddx Vista. You could even do this with analog. It's all just about the same. You'll find a number of different mounts around the camera platform here. This main one is where your GoPro will go. Underneath here is where your VTX gets mounted. You can use the zip ties included with your hardware pack here. And I personally like to use a strip of VHB double-sided tape to secure this down like so. You want the camera cable pointing towards the front of the gimbal and the antenna pointing towards the back near the camera IMU shroud. So this will get mounted on here like so. Then you'll find the FPV camera mount on the side here. This camera mount is a little bit flexible, so it supports both the 20mm and 19mm common cameras. And you can use once again, the hardware found in here, the 2mm bolts, to secure this camera down, as you would on a normal FPV quad. And lastly, you will find an antenna mount on the back here. This is designed to fit most modern antennas, like the DJI-03 antenna. It clips in, and then you'll find a little gap that goes through. You can weave a zip tie through here, and that'll do. So just to show that once again on a unit that's completely ready to go, the VTX is mounted on the bottom here. The FPV camera is screwed in on the side, and then the antenna is secured with a zip tie back here. Now, in terms of powering the VTX, the camera IMU, which is the electronic board inside of here, has output power. To access it, you're going to want to unscrew this 2mm bolt securing the plastic shroud, and you'll want to just loosen this top 2mm bolt here, and that will allow you to flip up the shroud, revealing the electronic board inside. Now, if we take a look at this connector right here, you'll find a pinout with 5V, 12V output, along with RC input if you're using something like the DJI system with their remote. In this case, I'm using the 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗓 system, so I have the 12V and ground pins wired up to the input power of the VTX, and it's as simple as that. Now we can secure the shroud back in place. And lastly, I want to show the differences of what this would look like on the plastic gimbal. It is very similar. You'll have your FPV camera mount on the side, but instead of mounting the VTX on the bottom, you're going to mount it basically behind where the GoPro will sit. So the GoPro sits like so, and then the VTX sits on this platform here. And you'll access power and RC input the exact same way. If you take this 2mm bolt off, you'll find the exact same board with the same pin out, and that's how you can wire that up. If you have any questions about setting up the VTX or anything else throughout this guide, don't hesitate to contact us through our contact page on our website. Next, we can move on to actually mounting the GoPro. If you have the Sony RXO version, this will be basically the same, just the mount will look slightly different for the 1/4" format of the Sony RXO. We can take the GoPro and flip out the tabs and insert it into the mount. And now with the gimbal in place, the next step is to check the balance before we lock everything down. Now, the ready-to-fly gimbals are shipped pre-balanced and test flown, so they should be pretty close, but it can be a little bit off if you're using a different VTX system or just a slightly different configuration. So we'll want to check for that and adjust it. Now you'll see that each motor has a set of slots and screws that you can loosen up and slide as you need. So one for the yaw axis, roll axis, pitch axis, and then you can slide the camera back and forth here also. When it comes to balancing the gimbal, it is very important that you get this as close as possible to perfect. The better it is, the better the gimbal will perform. And there's a certain point where the gimbal will not be able to perform at all, or not at least with a lot of vibrations. So we can test this by taking our GoPro, inserting it. I'm not tightening it down with the bolt yet because we'll need to adjust this probably. And what we're looking for is we want the camera to stay in the position it is no matter where I let it go. So right now I'm gonna just hope that it stays in its current position as I let it go, and it doesn't. You see it slides to the left, which means that the roll axis needs to be slid in the opposite direction. So I will do that right now. I'm going to loosen up these 4 bolts here. And I'm going to move it just a little bit in the opposite direction. You may not even be able to see this that well. Now balancing does take a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of practice, but it is one of those things where once you get it in the right position, you don't need to mess with it. It's like a set and forget type of thing. So now I'm trying again here, and it looks like I might have I overshot a little bit. Now it's sliding a little bit in the opposite direction. So I'm going to loosen these up and slide it just a little bit. If you're moving these back and forth a lot, my recommendation is just to tighten down one bolt as you're trying different balance points. This way you don't have to constantly loosen and tighten all of the bolts. We'll try the GoPro once more, and that's looking just about right. So now I'm going to go ahead and properly tighten all of the bolts, and it's good practice to just go around and make sure that all of the bolts are tight throughout the gimbal before flight. And I recommend checking on this a couple times throughout the year as you use the gimbal. So finally, we'll take our GoPro, slide it in, and we'll take the bolt with our 3mm hex driver and secure the GoPro down. And we'll do one final check of the balance. And once again, we want to see that the camera is sitting in the position we're leaving it at, no matter where we're leaving it at and what orientation. Now, keep in mind that the yaw axis has a slip ring, so you can rotate it as much as you want. However, the pitch and roll axis do not. So eventually, if you twist it too much in one direction or another, the camera will want to swing back to its original position. These are really quite high quality wires, so you don't have to worry about these breaking if you twist them too much. Over time, they could frail, in which case we do include an extra set of wiring that runs through the gimbal, and this can be replaced at any time without the need for soldering. Now with our camera and VTX mounted on the gimbal and our gimbal mounted to the drone, we can take a look at powering. As mentioned before, the gimbal comes pre-connected with a balance connector for a 6S battery, which I will use to power up in just a moment. However, I also want to point out that the wiring pack comes with connectors that you can solder directly into the drone. The blue wire is not necessary. That's for RC input on the 2-axis gimbal, so you can chop this off. And then the red and black should be wired directly to VBAT within the drone. On this quad, I'll show you here, I have this cable soldered in, connected directly to the ESC input pads. However, on some flight controllers and ESCs, there's separate VBAT pads that you can solder to. Anything like that will work. The main thing is do not power the gimbal from a regulator. The gimbal has a built-in regulator that it's meant to work off of, and anything else may restrict the power that the gimbal needs. Alright, as we get ready to power up the gimbal, the two rules of thumb are that the gimbal needs to be completely still when it's starting up, and the gimbal needs to be facing forward in regards to the yaw axis. So if the gimbal is facing to the side or backwards, it won't start up properly when you try it. So with the gimbal facing forward and standing still, you can go ahead and plug it in. It will start up and it'll start a calibration process, which just takes a couple seconds. And it will finish with those beeps signifying that it's ready to go. And you can go ahead and pick it up and move it around and see its range of limits. You'll notice that it can go back and forth a lot, and of course the yaw axis is unlimited, but the roll axis is limited by gimbal lock, meaning that the roll axis and the yaw axis intersect, and the gimbal gets confused, and it's a general problem with gimbals. Now the last step will be to get some RC control over this gimbal. Now as we do this, the gimbal will be sitting here for a bit of time, and you'll notice that the motors get decently warm, which is normal and not a problem, but also the VTX is powered up and it'll be getting very hot as we work on the RC control. So what I'm going to do here is unplug the gimbal, and I'm just going to unplug the VTX. You can do so either from the VTX side or from the IMU, depending on what VTX you have. And that way we don't have to worry about it overheating while we do this next step. We'll power up the gimbal again, and you should be able to see, or I'll show it in just a moment here once the gimbal starts up, that there is a crossfire receiver on the side here. You see it blinking. Our receivers come straight from the factory, and with crossfire, that means they come in binding mode. For ELRS, if you're not familiar with the binding instructions, I'll have links to some of Joshua Bardwell's videos down in the description. In terms of the controller, just about anything that supports crossfire or ELRS works. I do suggest having a controller with full-size gimbals, or as big of gimbals as you can get it, as that will make it easier to track. But once again, you can use just about anything. We'll go ahead and power up the radio, and we'll set up a model for the gimbal. It's really quite an easy process to do. The gimbal comes with a configuration with different switches and sticks pre-assigned. So we'll just set up a model for that, and then you can always modify it using the Gimbal GUI in the future, and we'll have separate videos for that. And now the process that I'm about to go through on the controller will look a little bit different on every controller. This is a Jumper T16, very similar to the Radiomaster TX16S. But there's, touch screen, and it could look different if you're using Edge TX. So if you need any help, again, feel free to contact us. I'll go to our model select, and I'm gonna long hold the scroll wheel to create a new model. This will come up with a prompt for airplanes and helicopters and whatnot, but we're not gonna use this. We're gonna hit return back out of that. And we're gonna pull up our model setup pages here, and we're gonna scroll over. First we're gonna check that our inputs were set up properly by OpenTX, meaning that rudder, elevator, throttle, and aileron are set up as you see it here on channels 1 through 4. Next we'll move over to the mixes tab, and we're gonna add a couple switch functions that will control the gimbal here. First, we'll start with channel 5. We'll just click on it. That'll make a new mix. And we'll head over to the source, click it so it activates, and we're going to want to use any 2-position switch. It can be either a momentary or just a normal 2-position switch. I'm going to be using the momentary in the back here, and this switch will control the ability to recenter the camera. If the pitch or roll axis are too far off, you can just recenter it at the flick of a switch. So with the SF set for the switch, we can back out, and that'll be set. Next, we'll go to channel 6, and we'll want to use a 3-position switch on the right side of the radio. In my particular case, I'll be using SD, this switch on the right here. And this will select between 3 preset sensitivity settings for both the yaw and the pitch axis. So we'll go ahead and select SD, and we'll back out. And then one more, we'll go to channel 7, hit source, activate it, and I'm going to use a 3-position switch on the left side here, SA, and this switch will activate and deactivate the ability to control the roll axis on this left stick here. So now we can back out of that. And the last thing I want to do before we go ahead and bind the radio is I want to set some expo on the controller. This is not necessary, but the gimbal has acceleration smoothing along with rates, but there's no built-in expo, and we find that expo is very useful to get smooth shots. So we're going to set that very quickly, both on the yaw and the pitch axis. We'll start on channel 2, the elevator. You'll find that this is the pitch axis. We'll long hold it, hit edit, and then we'll go down to curve, and we'll change diff to expo, and then we'll set our expo to about 60%. We'll hit return, back out of that, and then we're going to do the same thing for channel 4, which is our yaw axis, aileron. Scroll down to diff, change that to expo, and we'll increase that to about 60% once more. You can play around with this number, but we find that 60% is a sweet spot. Lastly, we need to address a bug within the gimbal software. In fact, it's the only known bug. And it's related to the trims, and that the center that the radio outputs is not centered for what the gimbal is receiving. So in order to adjust this, we simply need to go back to our home page. We'll hold down the scroll wheel and enter our monitors. And then for our yaw and pitch axes, channel 2 and channel 4, we're going to adjust our trims just a couple of clicks. And so right now I'm adjusting channel 4, and you're going to see the percentage go up here as I go, and we're looking for 4%. To be exact, we want the output here to be 1520 US. And we'll do the same thing for pitch. There we be. And if you plan to use roll, you should do this also. So we'll increase the trim till we get 1520 US. All right, and we'll back out. And now really the last step is to bind the Crossfire receiver. This might be a little bit different if you're using ELRS. I'm gonna go to our model setup, scroll down on the first page until we get to our external RF, because I'm using a Crossfire module on the back here. And I'll set that to Crossfire here. And see that it's powered on here. And then I'll use the Crossfire Lua script to go into the TX and hit bind. This will go into the bind mode. You'll see that the receiver is now flashing red, and we'll go ahead and update the receiver. Alright, and now that your receiver is bound, you should have control over the gimbal. So you can go ahead and try moving the yaw stick back and forth, along with pitch, up and down. And we can go ahead and try our different switches. So if I tilt the pitch down, and then I hit the 2-position switch, it should recenter, which it does. Now this switch is not set up to recenter the yaw axis, but this can be configured to do so within the GUI. Next, we'll check out our sensitivity switch. So I'm just going to get a feel for what the maximum rotation is like and how the smoothing works as we move it back and forth. Then I'm going to flick the 3-position switch down 1 notch. And we'll notice that the movement is a little bit quicker and there's a little bit less smoothing in the acceleration. And then if we move it down once more, you'll notice that there's a lot more direct control, there's less smoothing, and the overall rates are a lot faster. And so you can go ahead and play with which setting you like most, and this can be tailored and tuned to your exact needs within the configurator. Lastly, we'll test out the 3rd switch, which controls the roll axis. You'll notice that right now, if I move the roll stick, nothing is happening no matter what I do. If I move the switch down 1 notch, then we'll have control over the roll axis. And if we move it down one more, there is a different sensitivity for the roll axis. It's a lot smoother and finer control. At this point, I recommend unplugging the gimbal. You can go ahead and plug the VTX back in, bind it to your goggles, and your gimbal is good to go. Now I do want to remind you to just make sure that all of your bolts are tight, particularly the big 5mm bolt that locks down the gimbal to the drone. And once again, when you're starting up, every time you want to make sure that the gimbal is facing forward, it's standing still, and it's well balanced. The last thing to go over is the 3rd-person perspective mount. Now this mount is great to use something like a Insta360 Go or a GoPro mounted onto here on top of your battery or anywhere else on your quad to get a 3rd-person perspective view of the gimbal. So we'll demonstrate real quick. I'll go ahead and feed this strap through the mount, and then I will strap down the battery as I normally would, like so. And this gives you a nice secure mounting point for something like this Insta360 Go. You would secure it just like you would with any GoPro, and then you can position it and get your shots. I've also found that this mount can be mounted to something like the arms using zip ties for bottom mount configuration, and just about anywhere that you can imagine. Thanks for watching this guide. Now we'll have more in-depth guides in terms of how to configure the RC control, how to use the gimbal configurator to tune the gimbal to your needs, along with many other tutorials available on our YouTube channel. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us with any setup questions as you use it, anything. We're more than happy to help, and we're looking forward to seeing what you can do with our gimbals. All the best.